Natural light photographer, founder of Spruce and Sparrow, wife and mother of 3. From climbing the corporate ladder to chasing her passion, Liz Bourassa took herself from mundane corporate job to a highly sought-after professional photographer in Canada. This is how she made it happen. I want to go back to the beginning. Where did all of this sort of stem from?
My dad was a very talented artist. He taught me to paint with watercolors from actually a really young age. I feel like I was probably about 8. He actually taught me to do a lot of things like arrange flowers, decorate cakes, all the things that being a lawyer seemed very strange because that's what he did as a profession.
Oh, wow.
So he had a lot of outlets for his artistic side. And I have 3 older brothers, and I'm the only one who seems to be artistic out of all of us. They have a lot of strengths in like the business and numbers and all of that, whereas mine has always lay on the arts. Before I actually dove full-time into photography, I was working in oil and gas under that bracket of work. How I ended up actually getting into photography, like truly into it, was after I married my husband. We were given my first DSLR as a wedding gift from my aunt and my uncle. And at first we were like, oh, this is so cool, like a fancy camera, wow. And we would play around with it just on auto. And I started to notice, like, that's weird, I've got this nice camera, but my photos are not very good.
So do you remember the first photo that you took and what you thought about it? Like what you felt about your work at the time?
At the time I wasn't really considering it anything. What I was considering it was, why can't I get this camera to do what I want it to do? Like, why can I see something in my head, but when I'm using the camera, why can't the camera take the picture how my brain is seeing it? And that's when I realized that I would need to learn more about my camera.
Right.
I was lucky because at the time I was on mat leave with my 2nd child, so I had a lot of free time, and I happened to have a friend that was starting in the industry also. So we would use our cameras, and at that point I realized when I switched that flip into manual, all of a sudden I could actually take what was in my head and actually make a picture how I was envisioning it should be. Once I actually knew what I was doing with my camera, I was primarily just taking images of my kids. Like I had felt this overwhelming need to document their lives. At the time I was on mat leave, but I was heading back into long days working in an office downtown. I was gone 11 hours a day, including my commute time, and I was really feeling like I was missing so much of their life, and that made me really sad. And I just knew that if I could capture their lives in kind of a whimsical, beautiful way, they would always have these images to look back on, and I would have those memories to look back on. And in doing so, I would share this. This is when I started my first 365 project, where I take an image every day, which is typically my children or something in that realm, like of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was posting this on social media, suddenly I was getting messages from people being like, can I pay you to take pictures of me or of my family or
so
of
people
this in my life?
were approaching you before, was it even before you considered, you know, I can do this and make money off of this? Like you were getting that from other people?
Yeah, I was. Like I had done the odd thing for, you know, best friends and family, or like people close to me in my life, because I was really enjoying it. I still really enjoy shooting. And I think that that's something that really helps carry on with the difficult aspects of running your own business, is the fact that I actually truly do love what I do, and nothing brings me more joy than a client sending me a picture of their photo up on their wall, or like they're literally sobbing over how much they love their photos.
Mm-hmm.
That means more to me than anyone can actually express. But yeah, that's literally how it started. People being like, hey, can you take my photo? Can I pay you? And I was like, wait, hold the phone.
You're working full time, you're in oil and gas, you're working downtown. What kind of a factor did that play into you actually wanting to get out of that?
I loved the atmosphere of working downtown. I'm still friends with lots of people that I worked with at that company. And it wasn't the job itself, but it was more like I had got to the point where I couldn't do both things anymore. I was commuting an hour each way, and then I would bring my laptop to work. I would sit there at lunch and edit photos, and then I would go home. I would frantically pick up my kids from daycare, feed them dinner, put them to bed, try to get my one photo of the day in when it's pitch black out in the winter, which is hard. And then I would probably be up until 3 in the morning editing photos, falling asleep on my computer. There was countless nights where my husband would be coming to go to work, and he would literally be waking me up on our island and being like, you need to go to sleep.
Yeah.
You have to go to work in 2 hours.
Yeah. Do you remember that turning point or that pivotal moment that you said, I'm not going back to oil and gas. I'm not going back to my 9 to 5. I'm not doing it.
I do remember, but I had goals that I had to hit before I could do it. So I gave myself a year. I knew going into that year, this was the year. This is the year. I need to make this a viable business. I need to prove that if I'm going to walk away from this great position that I have working for a solid company, that it better be worth it. Like, I better be jumping off that building with something to land on. So that was the year where I was falling asleep on my island and like hustling so hard. And it was worth it. Like I said, for those people that are thinking about taking the dive, that first year might be a real rough one, but like when the waters do settle, things will run more smoothly, and all of a sudden you're going to have a lot more flexibility in your life. I felt like the regret I would have walking away from potentially living the dream job for myself would eat at me so much more than giving up on it, right? Like, I just feel like I had to do it. It was my leap of faith moment, and I am so glad that I did it, and I was lucky that I had so much support around me. There was a number of years that I literally couldn't have got through without my close family who helped us out with childcare all the time, and close friends that helped us out all the time. And I honestly had like a terrible work-life balance, but I knew that in time I could build myself to the point where I would be able to get that work-life balance into a more healthy zone. My husband was very honest. He felt that I had enough talent and drive that I could do it. Mm-hmm. But of course, he was also like, but you're walking away from like an awesome job. Like, you know, it is scary. And then I think it also left him in a position where he felt like, okay, well, I'm carrying the whole load here. So, which, you know, not everyone would do for somebody. So I do appreciate that. And I know that that's one of the main reasons that I was even able to take that leap of faith, was the fact that he was behind me. But oh man, it was terrifying. And anyone else that's out there in that position of on the verge of knowing that they want to go this direction with their life and take that risk and chance, or like play it safe.
You always say jump?
Yep. Oh yeah, jump. I definitely had a long period of time where I felt like I was holding on by a thread as far as my mental state went for like the balancing act of life. It's hard being a mom and a working mom. You feel like you're being pulled in so many directions.
Yes.
One big struggle for me was childcare. My husband is in construction. He works really strange hours. So finding reliable childcare has been really difficult. And I got to the point where when I was staying up until the crack of dawn, working all the time, and then having to get up and deal with toddlers and life, I was like a zombie. And it was affecting me on a level that it shouldn't have. Well, I shouldn't have let it get to that point. And that's kind of when I was like, enough's enough. We need to do something about this. So we actually have an au pair now, which is a live-in nanny. Mm-hmm. And she has changed my life. Like I work normal hours. I can keep my Sundays free for my family. I don't work those days, whereas before I would kind of always cater to everyone else and let myself like wear myself into nothing because I was always catering to everyone else. So learning to set boundaries for myself was a huge change in my life. That with the nanny and setting boundaries, I've found that my work-life balance is finally starting to level out, and I feel like I don't have that guilt sitting over me when I'm not working, which was something that I struggled with for a while, especially in my first year when I was just doing photography.
Studio is not, your passion. What are your passions the most? What is it that you love to shoot?
Well, I'm a natural light photographer, so I am primarily outside. However, winter months, obviously, I shoot inside as well. I would class myself as a lifestyle photographer. So I give mild direction, mild posing, and then I look to get real connection versus posed smiled. That being said, I always throw the grandma wall hanger in, as I call it, which is everyone looking and smiling, because grandma wants it. So I don't want to leave you empty-handed, but that's not what I want. I want to get the real interaction, and for example, like a family session, I want to get those kids out there throwing rocks in the water, twirling in their dress, or like adventuring and finding things and showing mom and dad and leading them places, and that interaction of together, because at the end of the day, those images are going to speak more truly to who that family is versus everybody formally sat on a blanket together looking at the camera. And knowing your style and being true to your style will save you a lot of time and heartache, really.
Tell me one of, or maybe the most memorable reaction that you've had from a client afterwards.
Geez, I don't know. I've had lots of very kind messages sent. One thing that I do know, if I was speaking out there to clients, is we like feedback. If you felt like your experience wasn't great, give me that feedback, because I do want to hear it. Or if for whatever reason you weren't happy with the images, like I do want to hear that. Of course, I obviously love hearing the other side when people are really happy as well. That always makes me feel great and kind of like, oh, everyone's looking at me. But that's my goal, is to get you something that you love and that you want to blow up on a giant canvas and put on your wall. But again, that sometimes getting negative feedback is a good thing, because then you can change your processes or create a better experience. I feel very connected to my stuff, so which can be hard. So that's one thing that is definitely hard in this type of field, is that because it's an artistic craft, it's very personal, and sometimes it's hard to not let situations become personal. Even though sometimes what ends up happening after for example, you have a potential client that you're meeting with, and everything goes fine and yada, 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 and then later you hear from them that they've gone with somebody else. Well, I always tell my clients when I meet with them, like, we need to jive. Like, you need to like me. I'm going to be, for example, a wedding, I'm going to be with you all day. So if you don't like me being around you, it's going to be really hard to get good photos for you. So you need to kind of trust that everybody that comes to you isn't necessarily going to go with you, because they're going to go with the person that works best for them. And just because they aren't going with you doesn't mean that you're not as good, or your images are bad, or your experience is bad. Often it comes down to, hey, they just find somebody that just fits with them a little bit better. So getting over that hump can be hard, because I do find it's really easy to take it personally if somebody decides to go like another direction with their booking.
So how do you then give back to the photography community? I know that you were mentioning it's definitely important to you to do that. How do you do that?
I eventually do want to do more. Right now I just have my beginner workshop, which is the basics of manual shooting. I do get into a little bit more, but not too much, because I do find that it's overwhelming if you don't understand that exposure triangle correctly, and the purpose of that class is to really understand how to use your camera. I am working on my next phase of those workshops that will be more of that creative aspect, because once you've mastered manual, then you can really get into like editing and composition and light and all the other aspects that create a really good image connection, all of that. Which, again, I think is too much for somebody if they're learning exposure still. Once you have a full understanding of your camera, then it's like things really open up and you can really do a lot more.
Did you attend something like that when you started out? Some beginner workshop that taught you, or did you kind of just struggle through it on your own?
I did a lot of it on my own, which was kind of actually what initiated me to do the workshop, was because when I was learning, a lot of the stuff that I was finding out there, I struggled with. Like I wanted more of a hands-on approach, and I'd had friends that had gone to like the college courses, and they showed me their notes from it, and I was like, well, yes, like I understand why they're talking about how the pupil and iris of an eye work, but that's really not relevant. Like, it's really not relevant in actually how to use your camera. Like, yeah, you're being taught how light travels through an eyeball and how that's similar to how it travels through the lens of a camera, but knowing that isn't going to tell you how to adjust your settings to expose correctly. It kind of cuts out the mumbo jumbo that some of these classes bring into it. And then it also, it's a very small learning group, typically 10 or less, and everybody, you're in a nice, comfortable setting where everyone can ask whatever questions they want. Mm-hmm. No question is stupid. I'll literally hold your camera for you, and we'll find where we need to change the setting in your camera, because that alone can be so overwhelming for somebody. I mean, a lot of these cameras are not designed to be used very easily, and their manuals are like this thick. So when you're like, okay, how do I change my shutter? Shutter's on page 180. So, you know what I mean? It's just like, if you can walk in and somebody can say, hey, this is where it is, this is what you do, it functions with these other things in this way, makes it a little more easy.
You just saved yourself 179 pages.
And then I throw in a few of my favorite other shooting things and things that I look for, and like the gear that I use and all of that stuff, because that is a common question I have.
If you could talk to yourself at the beginning, what would you say to yourself to, I think, maybe help you along the way, or maybe not make as many of those mistakes or hurdles?
First and foremost, set up your business properly from the very start, because the longer you wait to set it up properly, the more annoying it will be, and the more challenging it will be, and the more you'll want to push it over there and just pretend it doesn't exist. So get set up properly right away. Second of all, I found I was being told by other people that may have had more knowledge than me at the time, but I was being told like, oh, you should get this, or you should do that, or this is how you should do it. Well, no, look at everything. Look at everything. What are you drawn to? And then focus on those areas, because if you're just out there shooting everything, yeah, it'll get you an idea of what it's like, but if it's something that you never felt connection to, why are you doing it? For example, when I first started, I would do like a studio cake smash. I don't like studio. I don't like artificial light, and I don't really like getting messy or setting up all like a million props. Like, that's just not my style at all. So why was I doing it? Right?
Was it because other photographers were doing
because
it?
other people were telling me you should start with this stuff.
Yeah.
So in reality, I kind of wish that I had looked at what I enjoyed capturing, which for me is like true connection and using light in powerful ways, that type of thing. And I should have focused in on that more. And you know, you live, you learn.
The reason that you did this was to live your passion. That was the reason you did this. Is it sometimes challenging to stick to that passion and veer off where people kind of want you to go or suggest you go?
It is really challenging. And I think one of the hardest things that I had to learn was to say no. To say no. I mean, if it's not something that you're going to do well, then say no and refer them to somebody else who does it well. If somebody comes to me and says they want a studio newborn session, I'm going to refer them to somebody else, because that I don't offer that. And I think as entrepreneurs, we're always afraid to say no to something, because you think, if I say no to this, then it's just, I'm not going to have anything else come to my door. And that's not the case. You need to be true to your brand, you need to be true to yourself, and you need to offer a consistent product. And if I was taking everything that came knocking, I wouldn't be offering a consistent product at all. And I wouldn't be enjoying what I was doing, because I find it stressful when I but when I take on projects that aren't something that speak to me.